Hi guys, in this lecture I want to talk a little bit about the history of web development and try to define what web development is. Web development is the field that deals with developing and building web applications. A web application is an application that uses the browser as its user interface and doesn't usually need any installations but relies on data from a distant server. But before we delve deeper in the web applications world, let's make a quick review of the history of the web, and don't worry, it's really quick. In the early days of the internet, the web was used to deliver contents only, in what was known as websites. A website is accessible via the browser, but it doesn't give any functionality to the user. The browser shows content to the user by reading HTML files that contain the data to be shown and rendering instructions. It wasn't long before websites started to include some functionality in them. For example, login pages, forum and news groups, simple games, all those enhanced the static websites, and more websites weren't static content presenters anymore. They became what is known as web applications. Web application still uses HTML for rendering user interface, but it also uses a programming language to manipulate data that comes and goes to the server. This programming language is JavaScript. It's easier to understand web applications by seeing an example, and luckily, nowadays web applications are very common, so it's pretty easy to find one of those. Take for example an application for ordering tickets for movie. All you have to do to activate this application is to open your browser and enter the app's address. Then you'll be able to watch movies list, order seats, pay or cancel your reservations. But the thing that makes all of that a web application instead of desktop application is that you didn't have to download or install any component or software in order to use the app. You just need a web browser. And this is the main characteristic of a web application. It's accessible from anywhere using a web browser and doesn't need any pre-installed software beside the browser. In a matter of fact, if you're watching this video in the browser, you are using a web application. During the years, the model that was used is a thin client. By this approach, all the major applications parts, data, logic, authentication, and so on, were located on a strong and fat server. The client was thin in the way it didn't have any of those. The client requested data from the server. The server would respond with an HTML string that included the data and was rendered by the browser to the client. This approach, in some variations, was the main approach of writing web application. The main characteristic of this approach is that for every request to the server, the entire page is refreshed. This cycle of request, response, refresh took its time and made web applications to be less responsive and less user-friendly. The big change in the field came with a technology called Ajax. It was invented by Microsoft, but was actually used massively by Google's mail service, Gmail. Ajax enables us to send the server a specific request and get a specific response without having to refresh the entire page. So, if we want to update a small part of the page, we can send an Ajax request to the server, while the rest of the page is still functional and responsive. The abilities of Ajax technology, as were demonstrated by Google, raised an arms race between all major browser vendors that added new and interesting features to the browser. With the advance of technology, and especially networking technology, it became faster and faster to give the client more responsibilities than ever and make it less thin. Tasks that were traditionally performed by the server were now available in the client, using Ajax and JavaScript. Web applications had changed their face again, and now they are known as Single Page Application or SPA. It means that in the first request of the app, the client gets most of the app's logic from the browser, and from now on, the client runs the code. When the client needs something from the browser, it requests the data using Ajax. In this scenario, the applications become faster than ever, very responsive and effective, but they still have the advantages of the web. They are online, can be accessed from anywhere, and don't need any installations. So back to the beginning. Web development is the field of development single-page web applications using HTML and JavaScript. Now let's go on to the next section and start to build our knowledge.